Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
Got pinned down by an heiress 15 years younger in the kitchen. They say food is the way to someone's heart. But nobody warned me that the kitchen could become a battlefield where desire meets danger, where a single taste could unravel everything. I thought I knew about love, power, and the price of truth. My name is Esme Mitchell, and at 38, I thought I had tasted everything life could serve up. As Fort Worth's most feared food critic, I had dissected countless meals, reduced chefs to tears with a single review, and built my reputation on an uncompromising palate and razor-sharp pen. My column in the Fort Worth Tribune could make or break a restaurant overnight. I wear that power like armor, believing it protected me from the messy complications of human connection. But armor, I learned, is useless against someone who knows exactly where to find the chinks. It was a sweltering August evening when my carefully constructed world first began to crack. The outdoor cinema in Sundance Square was screening Julie and Julia, and despite my cynical nature, I couldn't resist the irony of watching a food movie under the stars. I had claimed a spot on my vintage blanket, a thermos of cold wine beside me when she appeared. Quinn Cooper moved through the crowd like she owned the very air around her. 23 years old, with sun-kissed auburn hair that caught the dying light and eyes the color of dark chocolate. She possessed the kind of confidence that money and privilege tend to breed. But there was something else, a restless energy, that spoke of hands that knew real work, despite the designer jeans and artfully casual appearance. She settled on the blanket next to mine, close enough that I caught her scent, vanilla and something smoky, like she'd been standing over an open flame. When she turned to me with a smile that could have melted butter, I felt something stir that I'd kept buried for years. "Mind if I ask what you think of Meryl's knife technique?" she said, nodding toward the screen where Streep was massacring an onion. I nearly choked on my wine. "Are you seriously asking me to critique fictional food? Preparation?" "I'm asking because you're Esme Mitchell, and your review of Brennan's last month made me rethink everything I thought I knew about proper seasoning." The fact that she recognized me should have been my first warning. Food critics survive on anonymity once your face becomes known. Authentic dining experiences become impossible. But something about the way she said my name, like she was tasting it, made my professional caution evaporate. "You read restaurant reviews for fun?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I read yours because they're art," she said simply. "The way you describe the duck confit at Le Bernardin, symphony of fat and flesh that speaks to the primal soul. I actually dreamed about that dish." Before I could respond, the movie began, but I found myself stealing glances at this stranger who quoted my reviews like poetry. During the film's most romantic scenes, I caught her watching me instead of the screen, and each time our eyes met, I felt that dangerous flutter of possibility. When the credits rolled, she turned to me with devastating directness. "I'm Quinn Cooper, and I'd like to cook for you." Cooper, the name should have triggered immediate alarm bells. The Cooper family owned half of Fort Worth's restaurant scene, from high-end establishments to casual dining chains. They were culinary royalty with fingers in every pot and the political connections to keep them stirring. But in that moment, under the stars with this beautiful young woman looking at me like I was the most interesting thing she'd ever encountered, I forgot about family names and professional ethics. "I don't accept invitations from strangers," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Then let's not be strangers." She pulled out her phone with the fluid confidence of her generation. "What's your number? I promise I won't disappoint you." 3 days later, I found myself standing outside a converted warehouse in the Bishop Arts District, questioning every decision that had led me to this moment. The building looked like nothing special from the outside, weathered brick and industrial, windows that revealed only darkness within. But when Quinn opened the door, dressed in chef's whites that somehow made her look both professional and impossibly sexy, I realized I was walking into more than just dinner. "Welcome to Seaver," she said, her smile holding secrets I desperately wanted to uncover. The restaurant was a revelation. What had appeared empty from the street revealed itself as an intimate space of perhaps 20 tables, each one carefully positioned to create pockets of privacy. Exposed brick walls held candles that cast dancing shadows, and the open kitchen gleamed like a stage waiting for its star performer. "We're not open to the public yet," Quinn explained, leading me to a table positioned perfectly to watch the kitchen. Soft opening isn't for another month, but I wanted you to see it to taste what I can really do before the critics descend. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, the city's most notorious food critic, being seduced by a chef who didn't. Yet no, I was the very critic she feared. You seem awfully confident for someone who hasn't opened yet, I observed, settling into the plush velvet chair she held for me. Confidence is the first ingredient in any successful dish, she replied, her eyes never leaving mine. Without it, even the finest ingredients fall flat. But with it, she paused, letting the sentence hang between us like a promise. With it, you can transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. I watched, mesmerized, as she moved toward the kitchen. There was something almost predatory in her grace, like a panther preparing to pounce. She had tied her hair back, revealing the elegant line of her neck, and when she began to cook, I understood that I was witnessing something special. Quinn didn't just prepare food, she conducted it. Her hands moved with the precision of a surgeon and the passion of an artist. She seared scallops until they sang, their edges caramelizing into golden perfection. She whisked a sauce that seemed to shimmer with its own light. Every movement was deliberate, confident, seductive. Tell me about yourself, she called over the sizzle of the pan, never breaking her rhythm. What do you want to know? I deflected, still maintaining the fiction that I was just another dinner guest. Everything? What makes you laugh? What keeps you awake at night? What's the best meal you've ever had? The questions caught me off guard. When was the last time someone had asked me about myself rather than my opinions? I don't laugh much anymore, I admitted. And I stay awake thinking about all the mediocre meals I have to endure professionally. She paused in her preparation, turning to study my face. That sounds lonely. The simple observation hit harder than any elaborate diagnosis. I was lonely profoundly, desperately lonely in ways I'd trained myself not to acknowledge. My work required a kind of emotional distance that had gradually infected every aspect of my life. I ate alone, slept alone, lived in a pristine apartment that looked more like a showroom than a home. Maybe, I said quietly. Well, she said, returning to her cooking with renewed intensity, let's see if we can fix that. The first course arrived 15 minutes later, a small plate that looked like abstract art but smelled like heaven. 3 perfect oysters nestled in pools of champagne foam, each one topped with what appeared to be liquid gold. Kumamoto oysters with champagne sabayon and 18-karat gold leaf, Quinn explained, settling into the chair across from me. The gold is edible, a little excessive, maybe, but I believe the first impression should be unforgettable. I lifted the first oyster to my lips, acutely aware of her watching my every micro-expression. The taste was pure ocean briny, clean, with the champagne adding effervescence that made my taste buds sing, but it was the gold that surprised me. Not for its luxury, but for its subtle enhancement of the flavors beneath. Extraordinary, I breathed and watched her face light up with genuine joy. You mean that? I never lie about food. As the evening progressed, Quinn brought course after course, each one a small masterpiece that revealed new layers of her personality. A deconstructed Caesar salad that played with texture and expectation. Duck breast paired with cherry gastrique that somehow managed to be both comforting and sophisticated. A chocolate soufflé that arrived at the table still rising, defying gravity with the same audacity as its creator. But it wasn't just the food that captivated me. It was the way Quinn talked about each dish. The passion that illuminated her face when she described flavor profiles and cooking techniques. She wasn't just a rich girl playing at being a chef. She was an artist who happened to work in edible media. Where did you learn to cook like this? I asked as we shared the soufflé, our spoons occasionally colliding in the most deliciously intimate accidents. Everywhere, she said simply. Le Cordon Bleu in Paris, stages in Tokyo and Barcelona, 6 months working under Marco Pierre White in London. But mostly, I learned by failing spectacularly and getting back up to fail better. There was something in her voice, a steel beneath the silk, that made me realize I had underestimated her from the beginning. This wasn't some privileged princess playing dress-up in chef's whites. This was a woman who had earned her place in the kitchen through blood, sweat, and undoubtedly quite a few burns. And your family supports this? I asked, knowing something about the Cooper clan's business interests. Her expression clouded slightly. My family supports what's profitable. They see potential in Seaver because they see potential revenue streams. They don't understand that some things can't be measured in dollars and cents. Like what? Like the look on someone's face when they taste something that changes their understanding of what food can be. Like the satisfaction of creating something beautiful and temporary and perfect. She paused, her spoon tracing patterns in the chocolate. Like the connection between two people sharing a meal made with intention and care. The weight of her words settled between us, heavy with implication. I found myself leaning forward, drawn by an invisible thread that seemed to tighten with each passing moment. Quinn, I began, but she held up a hand to stop me. I know who you are, Esme. The words hit me like cold water. What? I've known since the moment you walked in here. Esme Mitchell, the Tribune's restaurant critic. The woman who can destroy careers with a single paragraph or launch them with a well-placed compliment. I felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that made me want to flee. Then why? Because I wanted you to taste my food without the weight of professional obligation. I wanted you to experience Seaver the way I hope all my guests will, with wonder. Instead of judgment, with openness, instead of criticism. And now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She stood from her chair and moved around the table until she was standing beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from her body. Now, I want you to know that everything I've shown you tonight was real. The food, the restaurant, the conversation, all of it. Real. Her hand found my cheek, fingers tracing a line from my temple to my jaw with devastating gentleness. The question is, what do you want to do about it? I should have left. Professional ethics demanded it. The Tribune had strict policies about conflicts of interest, and getting involved with the chef whose restaurant I might eventually review was a career-ending mistake. But when Quinn looked at me with those dark chocolate eyes, full of desire and challenge and something that might have been love, I found I didn't care about policies or careers or anything, except the way her thumb was now tracing my lower lip. I want ... I started, then stopped, afraid to voice the longing that had been building all evening. Yes, she whispered, leaning closer until I could feel her breath against my skin. I want to know what comes next. She smiled then, slow and predatory and full of promise. What comes next is the kitchen. Before I could protest or question or think, she had taken my hand and was leading me through the dining room toward the gleaming expanse of stainless steel and flame. The kitchen after service was a battlefield of beautiful chaos pans cooling on the stovetop, prep bowls stacked in organized towers, the lingering aromas of everything she had created for me. This is where the magic happens, she said, pulling me against the central island where she had prepared our meal. This is where I feel most like myself. Quinn, I don't think, but she silenced me with a kiss that tasted like chocolate and champagne and possibilities I'd been too afraid to imagine. Her lips were soft but demanding, and when her tongue traced the seam of my mouth, I opened for her like a flower blooming in the sun. The kiss deepened, became hungrier, more desperate. Her hands found my waist, pulling me closer until there was nothing between us but the thin fabric of our clothes. I could feel the edge of the steel counter, pressing against my back, could smell the lingering scents of garlic and herbs and something distinctly Quinn that made my head spin. I've wanted this since the moment I saw you, she murmured against my lips, her voice rough with desire. This is crazy, I breathed back, even as my hands found the buttons of her chef's coat. The best things usually are. She lifted me effortlessly onto the counter, positioning herself between my legs with a confidence that made my pulse race. Her hands were everywhere in my hair, tracing the line of my throat, skimming along my ribs with touches that were both reverent and possessive. Tell me you want this, she said, her eyes searching mine with an intensity that made me feel transparent. I should have said no. Should have maintained my professional distance, protected my reputation, kept the careful walls I built around, my heart intact. Instead, I pulled her closer and whispered, yes. What followed was a symphony of sensation that put every meal I'd ever critiqued to shame. Quinn made love like she cooked, with passion, precision, and an intuitive understanding of exactly what I needed. Her touch was fire and ice, demanding and giving, pushing me to the edge of control and then pulling me back until I was breathless and begging for more. The cold steel of the counter against my skin, the warmth of her mouth as she traced patterns along my collarbone, the sound of her breathing becoming as ragged as mine. Every detail burned itself into my memory with crystalline clarity. When we finally came together, moving in a rhythm as old as time itself, I understood that this wasn't just desire or attraction or even love. This was recognition, the deep, cellular acknowledgement that despite the difference in our ages, our Backgrounds, our entire worlds, we fit together with the inevitability of puzzle pieces finding their proper places. Afterward, we lay entwined on the kitchen floor, her chef's coat serving as an inadequate blanket as we caught our breath and tried to process what had just happened. Well, she said finally, her voice still husky with satisfaction, that definitely wasn't on the menu. I actually laughed for the first time in months. No, but it might have been the best course of the evening. She propped herself up on one elbow, studying my face with the same intensity she had shown when watching me taste her food. Where do we go from here, Esmond? It was the question I'd been dreading, the reality that had to intrude on our perfect moment. I don't know, I admitted. My job, your restaurant, your family, it's all so complicated. Life is complicated, she said simply. That doesn't mean we have to make it harder than it needs to be. But even as she spoke, I could see the challenges mounting like storm clouds on the horizon. The Coopers weren't just any restaurant family. They were Fort Worth royalty with the kind of influence that could destroy careers and reputations with a single phone call. And I wasn't just any woman, I was the critic who could make or break their daughter's dream with a few hundred words in the Tribune. The next few weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and mounting anxiety. Quinn and I met whenever we could, late dinners at her apartment, early morning coffee before she had to prep for service, afternoon walks through the botanic garden, where we could talk without fear of being recognized. Each encounter deepened our connection, but also highlighted the impossible situation we'd created. Seaver's official opening was scheduled for mid-September, and I knew that eventually I would have to review it. The Tribune's readers expected it, my editor demanded it, and professional integrity required it. But how could I write an honest review of a restaurant owned by my lover? And how could I write a dishonest one without betraying everything I'd built my career on? The answer came sooner than I expected and from a direction I hadn't anticipated. I was at my desk on a Tuesday morning, struggling with a review of a mediocre Italian place in Southlake when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the voice that greeted me was unfortunately familiar. Ms. Mitchell, this is James Cooper, Quinn's father. I believe we should meet. My blood turned to ice. I'm not sure what we would have to discuss, Mr. Cooper. Oh, I think we have quite a lot to discuss, particularly regarding your upcoming review of Seaver and your relationship with my daughter. The threat in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. I closed my eyes, feeling the walls of my carefully constructed world beginning to crumble around me. Where would you like to meet? I asked quietly. An hour later, I found myself sitting across from James Cooper in the mahogany-paneled splendor of his private office downtown. He was a man who had clearly been handsome in his youth, but success and power had hardened his features into something more intimidating than attractive. When he smiled, it was the predatory expression of a shark scenting blood in the water. Let me be direct, Miss Mitchell, he began without preamble. I know about your affair with Quinn. I know about your little rendezvous in her kitchen, your romantic walks, your cozy dinners. I know everything. I forced myself to remain calm, even as panic clawed at my chest. What do you want? What I want is for you to understand the position you're in. You're a respected journalist with a reputation for integrity. That reputation could disappear overnight if certain information became public. Relationships between critics and restaurant owners tend to raise questions about professional ethics, don't they? Is that a threat? It's a reality. But it's also an opportunity. He leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers like a villain from a bad movie. Seaver represents a significant investment for our family. We've poured millions into that restaurant, and we expect a return on that investment. A glowing review from Fort Worth's most influential food critic would go a long way toward ensuring that return. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't about protecting Quinn or preserving family honor. This was about money, pure and simple. James Cooper was trying to leverage my relationship with his daughter into a guaranteed positive review. And if I refuse, then I think you'll find that your personal life becomes a matter of public interest. Sleeping with sources tends to be frowned upon in journalism circles, doesn't it? I imagine the Tribune would be very disappointed to learn that their star critic has been compromising her professional integrity. I stood to leave, disgusted by his transparent attempt at blackmail. This conversation is over. Sit down, Miss Mitchell. We're not finished. Something in his voice made me pause. When I turned back, His expression had shifted from predatory amusement to cool calculation. You think this is just about one review? You think I'm some small-time operator trying to buy a favorable write-up? He laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. This is about the future of dining in Fort Worth. The Cooper name carries weight in the city, and that weight can crush careers just as easily as it can build them. You're threatening my job. I'm explaining reality. The Tribune depends on advertising revenue from restaurants. Cooper Hospitality Group represents a significant portion of that revenue. If I were to express concerns about a critic's professional conduct, well, newspapers these days can't afford to ignore the concerns of major advertisers. The full scope of his power became clear in that moment. He wasn't just threatening to destroy my relationship with Quinn or expose our affair. He was threatening to destroy my entire career, to blacklist me from the only profession I'd ever known or loved. What exactly are you asking me to do? Write a glowing review of Seaver, 4 stars minimum. Praise Quinn's innovation, the restaurant's atmosphere, the exceptional dining experience. Make it the kind of review that brings people flooding through the doors. And if the food doesn't deserve 4 stars? His smile was reptilian. Then I suppose you'll have to be creative in your interpretation. I left that meeting feeling like I needed a shower, but also with a new understanding of the forces arrayed against Quinn and me. Her father wasn't just controlling, he was corrupt, using his wealth and influence to manipulate outcomes that should have been based on merit alone. That evening, I called Quinn and asked her to meet me at my apartment. When she arrived, bringing takeout from our favorite Thai place and a bottle of wine, I could see the stress etched in the lines around her eyes. How much do you know about your father's business practices? I asked without preamble. She set down the food and studied my face. What happened? I told her about my meeting with James Cooper, watching her expression shift from confusion to anger to something that might have been resignation. I was afraid of this, she said finally. He's been asking questions about my personal life, pushing me for details about who I've been seeing. I thought he was just being overprotective. He's threatening to destroy my career if I don't give Seaver a positive review. And he'll do it too. She collapsed onto my couch, suddenly looking far older than her 23 years. You don't understand the kind of power he wields in this city. He's not just a restaurant owner, he's on the hospital board, the museum board, the Chamber of Commerce. He has politicians in his pocket and judges who owe him favors. So what do we do? We? She looked up at me with eyes that held both hope and fear. There is no we in this, Esmo. This is my family, my mess. You should walk away before he destroys everything you've worked for. I'm not walking away. You have to. Don't you see? This is exactly what he wants to control. The narrative, to use people's emotions against them. He's done it before with other critics, other journalists. He finds their weak spots and exploits them. Other critics? She nodded miserably. 3 years ago, a writer from Dallas Monthly was working on an expose about health code violations at Cooper restaurants. Suddenly, photos surfaced of him in a compromising position with a married city councilwoman. His career was over, and the story never ran. The pattern was becoming clear, and it made me sick to my stomach. James Cooper was a puppet master who pulled strings throughout the city, manipulating public opinion and destroying anyone who threatened his interests. There has to be a way to fight back, I said. Against what? Money? Influence? A network of corruption that goes back decades? Quinn shook her head. The only way to win is not to play his game. Then what do you suggest? She was quiet for a long moment, staring out my apartment window at the city lights that twinkled like false stars. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but sad. I think we should end this. Whatever this is between us, it's been amazing, but it's not worth destroying your career over. Quinn, no, listen to me. She turned to face me and I could see tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. I've been selfish, pursuing you without thinking about the consequences. My father is right about one thing: relationships between critics and restaurant owners create impossible conflicts of interest. So we just give up? Let him win? We protect what matters most: your integrity, your career, your future. Those things are more important than ... this. But even as she said it, I could see in her eyes that she didn't believe it any more than I did. What we had wasn't just physical attraction or infatuation. It was something deeper, rarer, worth fighting for. What if there was another way? I asked, what do you mean? What if we didn't have to choose between our relationship and our professional integrity? What if we could expose your father's corruption and protect ourselves at the same time? She looked at me like I'd suggested we rob a bank. How? By going public. By telling the truth about what he's doing, how he's trying to manipulate reviews, and silence critics. You can't be serious. He'll destroy us both. Maybe the truth is more powerful than his money and influence. We spent the rest of that night talking, planning, weighing risks and possibilities. By dawn, we had the outline of a plan that was either brilliantly courageous or spectacularly stupid, possibly both. The next day, I called my editor at the Tribune and requested a meeting. Sandra-chan had been my boss for 5 years, and while we weren't close, I respected her commitment to journalistic integrity and her willingness to take on powerful interests when the story demanded it. I need to tell you something that's going to complicate my job considerably, I began. Are you sleeping with a chef? She asked without looking up from her computer. I blinked in surprise. How did you? James Cooper called me this morning. He was very concerned about your professional conduct and thought I should know about your compromising relationship with his daughter. She finally looked up, her expression unreadable. So, are you? It's complicated. It always is. Tell me everything. I laid out the entire story of my relationship with Quinn. James Cooper's blackmail attempt, the pattern of corruption and manipulation that seemed to define his business practices. Sandra listened without interruption, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. This is a hell of a mess, Esme, she said when I finished. I know. I'm prepared to resign if... Resign? Are you insane? She leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. This is the biggest story to hit the food scene in years. A prominent restaurant family using blackmail and intimidation to manipulate reviews and silence critics. This is front page material. But my relationship with Quinn creates a conflict of interest that we'll have to address. You obviously can't review Seaver and will need to disclose your relationship in any story we run. But that doesn't mean we can't pursue the broader corruption angle. Relief flooded through me like cool water. What do you need from me? Evidence, documentation, sources willing to go on the record. And most importantly, cooperation from Quinn herself. If she's willing to publicly denounce her father's practices, that gives the story credibility and protection. Protection? It's harder to destroy someone who's already told their own story. If Quinn comes forward voluntarily, it takes away his power to use your relationship as a weapon. That evening, I presented the plan to Quinn over dinner at her apartment. She listened with growing amazement and what might have been admiration. You want me to publicly denounce my own father? I want you to tell the truth about what he's doing. Not just to me, but to other critics, other journalists, other business owners who don't have the resources to fight back. It would destroy my relationship with my family. It might, but it would also free you from his control, and it would protect other people from being manipulated the way we were. She was quiet for a long time, moving food around her plate without eating. When she finally looked up, her expression was resolved. What do you need me to do? The next few weeks were a whirlwind of investigation and preparation. Working with Sandra and a team of investigative reporters, we uncovered a pattern of behavior that went far beyond simple review manipulation. James Cooper had been systematically silencing critics, intimidating health inspectors, and using his political connections to smooth over problems that should have resulted in serious consequences. We found the Dallas Monthly writer who had been destroyed by the compromising photos. He was working at a small community newspaper in East Texas, his career effectively over. We found health inspectors who had been pressured to overlook violations. At Cooper restaurants, we found city council members who admitted off the record to feeling pressured to vote in ways that benefited Cooper interests. Most importantly, we found other restaurant owners who had been targeted for refusing to pay what amounted to protection money to the Cooper organization. The picture that emerged was of a family-run enterprise that operated more like a crime syndicate than a legitimate business. Through it all, Quinn was my partner in every sense of the word. She provided insider knowledge of her father's operations, connected us with potential sources, and most courageously, agreed to go on the record with her own experiences of intimidation and control. He's been grooming me my entire life to be his puppet, she told Sandra during a recorded interview. Everything I achieved culinary school, my stages in Europe, even Seaver itself came with strings attached. He's never seen me as his daughter, just as another asset to be leveraged for the family business. The story ran on a Sunday morning. In late September, spread across the front page of the Tribune with the headline, Appetite for Corruption, How One Family's Power Hungry. Dynasty Manipulates Fort Worth's Food Scene. The article detailed James Cooper's systematic abuse of power, complete with quotes from victims, documentation of payoffs and threats, and Quinn's first-hand account of growing up in a family where love was conditional on compliance. The reaction was immediate and explosive. By noon, every major news outlet in Texas was picking up the story. Social media erupted with accounts from other restaurant workers, food writers, and business owners who had been victimized by Cooper's tactics. The district attorney announced an investigation within hours of the story's publication. James Cooper's response was swift and vicious. By evening, his lawyers had filed lawsuits against the Tribune, Sandra, me, and Quinn herself, alleging defamation and breach of confidentiality agreements. His public relations team went into overdrive, painting Quinn as an ungrateful daughter, and me as a corrupt journalist who had fabricated the entire story to cover up my own ethical violations, but the damage was done. The court of public opinion had rendered its verdict, and no amount of spin could undo the detailed documentation we had provided. Within a week, 3 Cooper restaurants had closed amid health department investigations. 2 city council members announced they would not be seeking re-election. The mayor called for a comprehensive review of restaurant licensing procedures. Quinn bore the brunt of her father's rage. He cut off her trust fund, revoked her access to family properties, and publicly disowned her in a statement that accused her of betraying the family that had given her everything. But instead of breaking her, the attacks seemed to strengthen her resolve. "I've never felt freer," she told me one evening as we watched the sunset from the roof of her apartment building. "For the first time in my life, I'm not looking over my shoulder, wondering what price I'll have to pay for his approval." "Do you regret it?" I asked. She considered the question seriously. "I regret that it took me so long to find the courage to speak up. I regret all the people who were hurt while I stayed silent, but us, standing up to him?" She shook her head. "No regrets at all." The legal battles dragged on for months, but eventually, the Cooper family's lawyers realized they were fighting a losing battle. The documentation was too thorough, the sources too credible, the pattern of behavior too well established. One by one, the lawsuits were quietly dropped, settling for undisclosed terms that everyone understood favored the Tribune. James Cooper himself was eventually indicted on charges of racketeering and bribery, though his expensive legal team managed to negotiate a plea deal that kept him out of prison in exchange for massive fines and a lifetime ban from the restaurant industry. As for Seaver, Quinn made the difficult decision to close it permanently. "It was always tainted by his money," she explained to me as we packed up the kitchen equipment. "I want to start fresh, build something that's entirely mine." "And what would that look like?" She smiled, and I saw echoes of the confident young woman who had first approached me at the outdoor cinema. "I've been thinking about that. What if we started a place together? Not a traditional restaurant, but something new. A space where food and journalism intersect, where people can experience both exceptional cuisine and honest storytelling about where their food comes from."